Okay. Okay. So yesterday we were discussing about, quick recap about, how the abstraction and encapsulation works, how inheritance and polymorphism can be implemented. And we also discussed about the properties, right? So today's focus mostly would be on the constructors. Okay. But before I start constructors, just wanted to recap again. Okay. So by this time you already familiar what is class, right? Class is a prototype. It's a blueprint. So based on the class, you can define any number of objects. Okay, like the famous example what I always take is a car is a class. Okay, and we have we have Swift, we have Ferrari. Okay, we have Honda City. Okay, so we have different companies cars are there. So they are like so they are all are cars only, but they try to change. Some are sedan, some are hatchback, some are coupe cars, right? Some of them are SUVs. Like, so it's like they change some of the values, some of the properties of the car, and they make it unique for their company or for their brand. Okay. But if you ask me a theoretical definition for a class, it is simply, okay, a user defined data type. When I say user defined data type, okay, it's not an integer, it's not a float, it's not a string or array, right? It's I am defining. When I say, why I'm saying user defined, because class contains, okay, different set of variables, and the variables can be a integer, a string, or a character, or you can combine more like two or three data types. So if we are adding a different data types and bundling in one, right? That's a class. It's a different data types. If I want to store a marks, I will define integer. If I want to store name, I will define a string. So different data types, right? Integer and string. So class is a user defined data type, and say it represents both state and behavior. State means nothing but the variables or properties whatever we refer in the class. Behavior is the methods, because if you want to perform some action in a class, right, you write a methods, and by invoking the methods you perform that action. Okay. So just I mean, see, there is nobody is going to ask you the theoretically what is class and all those, but just you need to be familiar with this. Okay. And so class is a blueprint and object. So as if you define a class, it is not sufficient to use. Class is only a prototype, as I said. If you want to really start using the class, you have to create an instance that is called object. Okay. So if you are by creating the objects, you are started going to use that class. Okay. So if you just define a class, and if you're not going to, if you don't define any object, right? So you are not going to use that class at all. Okay, so a class contains a set of variables, properties, and methods. And if you want to use a class, you have to create an object. Okay, so if you see, I have creating this is a class called calculator. I'm creating a object called call object. Okay, and this is the new. The new means it is to instantiate or to create the object. I'm using new keyword, and calculator is my class. So by this time, we have been writing so many programs, right? And if you want to use a specific variable or method in that class, you have to use this dot operator. The object dot the method name, calculate sum. Okay, so this is what what I was telling, right? So class is, suppose employees in class. So I have defined some properties, some fields, and some methods. So only define the class is not enough. You have to create the instance of the class that is called object. So I have created two objects, emp1 and emp2. So once I create these objects, so whatever the properties or fields or methods I defined in the class, okay, so all these will be copied for this emp1 and also for emp2. Okay, so same set of properties, fields, and methods. It will be available for emp1 and emp2. Okay, so emp1, if you want to access the properties for emp1, You have to say emp1 dot the field name or emp1 dot the method name. Same way for emp2 also, some emp2 dot field or method. So suppose, let's say if you have an integer variable to store the marks, right? Okay, and the marks variable is a different for emp1 and emp2. It is separate. So if I want to access the marks for emp1 or the salary for emp1, I have to say emp1 dot salary, for emp2 dot salary. So it's unique. All these properties, fields and methods are unique for this emp1 and for this emp2 as well separately. So in memory, it is stored separately. You know, right? We we have heap memory and static memory. Okay, and whenever it's a object reference, right? We are using a reference type. Okay, object is a reference of a class, right? So whenever we create a reference type of objects, okay, the data is stored in the heap memory. Just try to recall whatever I mentioned in 2 days back, right? So we have a separate heap memory for employee 1 and separate heap memory for employee 2. Okay, so so far we have been writing so many programs. Okay, and if you see, mostly like now we were using we are prefixing the class with the public or internal, right? Okay, but in reality we have 4 different access modifiers. So when I say access modifiers, okay, it's basically the scope of the class. So where I can use this particular class. Okay, basically it's a boundaries of a class. So who can access, where it can be accessed. Okay, so remember guys, this access specifiers is not only for the classes. We can prefix for methods and fields and properties as well. Okay, so if you mention as a public access modifier for the class or method or field or property anywhere, if you mention public, so I'm focusing mostly on the class here. Okay, that's why you could see all the class keywords, but it can be applicable for methods, fields and properties as well. So when I say public class, that means the class is available for everyone. That's why it said public, right? And when I say private, the class is only applicable within the same class, within the same class. And when I say protected, okay, so the classes, whatever the code it has, right, in that class, it is accessible from that class. Okay, so protected means within the same class and whoever is going to inherit that particular class. So it's available in the current and the downstream also. And internal is, it is available within its own assembly. Okay, I'm saying own assembly. So remember, by this time you have heard of this DLLs, right? Normally we compile our code and we keep it in as DLLs, right? So when I say assembly, it's a DLL. Suppose if I define a internal class and if I am packaging it in my one of the DLL, so that class is only accessible for that DLL only. And if you don't specify anything for a class, by default it is internal. Okay, so just remember guys, what is the default access specifier for the class? It is internal. Okay, so let me show you, like, how I just try to differentiate how these works. Okay, so let me open my, okay, I think I already open. Okay, so private. Okay, we'll start with the private here. It's a private only, right? Okay, so what is private? Private is the code is accessible within the same class. Okay, within the same class. Okay, let's see here. So under this namespace, I have one class. Okay, it's a class name is car. Okay, and this class name, okay, contains private, right? So you see guys, I have mentioned as a private for this variable, right? Model, or maybe I think my Am I referring? Okay, let me, I think I'm trying to explain the variable, but I'm looking for a class which is private. Okay, so let me open a different one. Let me see if I have written something here. But what I can do, I will just change this program to say, okay, so I can say here only private. Okay, so it's a private class. So whenever I say private class, right? What is this? Okay, same class only, right? Why it is giving error? So it's the same class private. Okay, and it's one variable I'm using model tetra computing, and I have a one method within the same class, and I try to create. Okay, elements defined in a namespace cannot be explicitly declared as private protected internal. Okay, maybe let me see that this is giving an error. So it is, this is where it is giving error, right? Elements defined in a namespace cannot be explicitly declared as private, protected, protected internal, private protected. Not sure why this is giving core is inaccessible due to its protection level. It should be right because I'm using within my same method. I'm not using anywhere beyond my class. Class car cannot be explicitly declared as private, protected, protected internal, and private. I'm not sure why it says like that. Basically, it is saying that we should not declare this as a private. Okay, so I think probably I will come back this, but so what I'm trying to explain is that, like, if you declare any class or any method or any property with a private keyword, right? Okay, so this can be only accessed within your own class. Okay, so if you see, this is a method, or this is a variable I have declared within the same class, right? Within the same class, this is open and end. So within the same class, I have declared a private variable, and since it's within the same class, I should be able to invoke without any problem. So I have created a car object here. Okay, my object is, so if you see, car is the class and my object is the a reference or object name for the car, and I am trying to use the object dot the model. Okay, so it just simply prints tetra computing. Okay, this is for private. Let me show you. Okay, so I think it is same thing, right? Doesn't make any sense. Same thing. Okay, so basically just remember that if whenever you declare a private method or a private variable or a private property, it can only be accessed within the same class. Okay, you cannot access outside of your own class. Okay, and if it is public, right? Public means you can access everywhere, right? Okay, so if you see here, I think probably when you start writing bigger programs, I should be able to easily differentiate, like how where to use public and where to use private. Okay, but here see, I have used the public keyword here. Okay, so it can be accessed. Okay, and you see here, this is one class. Okay, and this is another class, right? So my main method is in this class. Okay, and this is a separate class, but since it is a public, right? It is a public variable. I should be able to access the variable model in this class as well. Okay, so if you see in this program, in the second class, okay, in the main method, I am declaring a object for car and I am trying to use the same value. So the difference between previous program, this program is that in the previous program, everything is in one class. Okay, this class is inside here. Okay, but whereas in this one, it's a class car is different and class program is different. Two different programs. Okay, let me show you the previous one just to make easier to understand the difference. Okay, you see here, it's only one class. Do you see in the example I shown, one is a car and one is I think program, but here it's only one class. See, in within the one class, to invoke this private variable by defining the object. Okay, so only one class. Remember, it's only one class. Within the namespace, you see only one class. But whereas in the public, right, you see two different classes. Okay, under the namespace, you have one class which has a public variable, and in another class, you see in another class, this one class, this is another class. In this class, okay, it has a main method, and I have created a object for car class. Okay, and I'm trying to print it. Okay, let's see if it is going to print or not. Okay, it printed. But see, what I'm going to do is now instead of public, I will say private. Okay, now let's see. You already see one compile time error. See, car.model is inaccessible due to its protection level, because this variable model is a private and it can only be accessed within this class. But you are trying to, okay, invoke that particular variable in another class. That's why it is giving the error that you cannot access model variable due to its protection level. Okay, so there's a difference between public and private. Okay, and so clear public and private within the class, outside the class. Okay, so protected, right? Protected is something which I will cover during inheritance, because it's basically to show you that, like, the protected modifier can work within the same class or in a class that is inherited from that class. So if I show you one inheritance examples, I should be able to explain clearly, how this protection class works. Okay. And internal is, say, normally if you see most of our programs are, we define with internal. Okay. So internal means in your, see, you are writing some 10 classes. Okay. And you are binding all these 10 classes into one common single DLL, or you can say single namespace. Okay. So if you define as internal, basically it works in the classes which are bound by the same namespace or same DLL. Okay. So internal is the one predominantly, we use in our day-to-day programs. Okay. And generally, if you are trying to use any third-party libraries, okay, so they make it public because it's a different DLL, okay, third-party library, so they want everyone to use it, right? So that's why they make it public. So remember, guys, okay, I will just try to put in a diagram so that you can easily understand. So it is, where at all you can access the class or method or properties. Okay, so within the class, derived class means it is inherited child class. Non-derived class, it's a separate class but same DL, same assembly. Okay, and derived class, a different DLL. Non-derived class, it's a different DLL. So as you already explained, public is accessible within the class or outside the class, irrespective of any DLL or any assembly. So it is accessible everywhere. Okay, and private is only accessible within the class. You cannot access in any other class, okay, or in any derived class, whether it is same assembly or different assembly. It's only within the class. Okay, and internal. So I just explained internal means you can access within the class, okay, and the class which is inherited in the derived class. Okay, and I said it works only within the assembly, right? Within the assembly means whether you inherit or not, but it is available. So it is within the class and within the same assembly, whether you inherit or not, but it is available. And protected is within the class, obviously, and also the class which has been using this or derived. So basically in the base class as well as the child class. But only caveat here is that if it is a child class, it can be the same DLL or different DLL. Okay, I will just put a pause, just go through it and and ask me if you have any questions. Public is everywhere, protected is only within the class, internal is within the class and within the DLL, within the same assembly. Protected is within the class and also the derived class, whether it is same DLL or different DLL. Any questions here?
Yeah. No. So in the real time scenario, which one do you use?
See, mostly we use internal. Okay, so mostly we use internal. Okay, because normally in typically or day-to-day programming we keep one DLL only. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
okay, so in standard wise, we mostly go with internal. But if you are keeping your application, or if you are building your application as a service and you're expecting someone else to use your DLL, you normally define with public.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah.
Okay, uh any other questions? Okay, so first two things you have to remember for for any, it's like a foundation for the classes or for the methods or properties. Okay, the first thing is the access modifier, okay, which is now we discussed about this public, protected, internal and private. Okay, another one is You have four different classes: static, sealed, partial, and abstract. This also one of the, we can use this also as a prefix for the class. Okay, but it is optional. It's basically depending upon the, how you wanted to the class to be working, right? So it depends upon that. You can mention this four different classes: static, sealed, partial, and abstract. So remember, guys, this this public protected internal private is, it's for the accessibility. How long you want your class to be accessible. Okay, whether you wanted to, or basically to set the boundaries for your class, who can access, who cannot access. Okay, and this one is basically tells about the behavior of the class, how this class works. Okay, the first one is accessibility, second one is the behavior of the class. It is static, sealed, partial, and abstract. Okay, so I think, I have already covered a little bit about the static class. Okay, so static class means you cannot create any object for the static class. It's a one of the blind rule. Okay, first thing is you cannot create any object. And once you define a static class, whatever the variables or methods or properties it has, everything is static by default. Okay, and once you create a static class, right, I mentioned you cannot create any object, and also you cannot inherit that static class to any other class. You cannot create a child class using the static class. Okay, so it's very very important. It's mostly, they will ask what is static class. Okay, static class. So the first thing you have to say is static class means it's a class where you cannot create the objects. Okay, so that is one thing. Second thing is you cannot have inheritance on the static class. And third thing is whatever the variables or methods or functions available within the class, they have to be static only. Okay, so I will tell you one example. Okay, so let me show you. Okay, you see, this is a math class, right? Okay, so if you go here, right, it will display this class. See, class system main math, right? I'm just trying to click here. Okay, you see here, it's a public. Why they mention public? Because they want this math class to be accessible for everyone, so that they can start using the members or the methods of a math class, right? That's why they made as public. Okay, and what is the second one you see? Static. Okay, that means whatever the methods or variables available in this math class, you can directly use. You do not require to create any object for the math class. You see here, I'm directly trying to use the math class, right? I might create this math is a class now, okay. See, I am not creating any object for the math. I'm directly using the method. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is that if you have defined a static class, okay, and if it is a public, and if we are going to consume it, right? See, basically, right, without creating the object you cannot use the class, but this is the exception for static class. Though you are not going to create the object, but still you can access the methods or variables from the static class by referring to the class name itself. You don't have the object for static class, that's why you have to use the class name dot the property or method or variable. Guys, clear, or any questions on the static class? Let me explain you with one example. Okay. So here you have a public class, the static type. Okay. And if you see, this is one class called college. This is one class. Okay. Which is college class, and another class which is a main class. Okay. So in the public class, in the static class here, okay, so I mentioned that, like, no, if you define a static class, all the data members and the methods has to be static. Okay, you see, I mentioned static for all three variables and also for the method also. Okay, so you have three variables defined as a static, and you have two methods. One is college method, one is timetable method. These two are defined with the static. Okay, so this constructor I will come back to you, but just now, just that we have a constructor called, just remember that constructor is basically the name of the constructor is same as class, college and college. Okay, I will come, like, in next few slides, after few slides. Okay, but what I'm trying to explain is that static class contains static methods and static variables. Okay, and now in another class, right? Okay, I mentioned that we cannot create the objects for the static class, but I can still access the methods or variables of that static class. So how do you use it? You have to mention the class name itself, class name dot name, class name dot address, because this name, address, phone number, these three are the variables. Okay, you see it's defined. Okay, since it is defined with the public, I'm able to access in another class, right? So the class name dot the three variables I referred, and also we have a timetable is a method, again a static, it's a public. So in another class, I am able to invoke that method as well. So it simply prints the values. So clear, guys? Static class. When I say static, or can
Yeah.
someone recap? Easy, and it's fairly easy. There is no object, and you simply
Yeah.
need to use static keyword. And if you,
Inheritance.
okay, there is no inheritance for static class.
All
And
method has to be static only.
yes, and
Yeah.
if you want to
If you
invoke
want
them,
access, yeah,
yeah,
we have to
yeah,
use the class name.
okay, fair enough, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, so
Yeah. Done.
done. Okay, so basically the best example, if someone asks, okay, you say that the math class, math is it's a predefined library, it's one of the BCL, base class library, right? And since everyone wants to use that class, okay, so they made it static. That's way you don't need to have additional step of creating a object of math and start using that methods. So they are avoiding that additional step. You can directly use the class name dot method. And in also, if you wanted to use that, right, so basically, if you have normally for every application, right, there is a config file. In config file we mention about the connection string, the database name, the user ID, password. Okay, all those are, it's we define only once, and normally you use those properties or the passwords or connection string or connection pool wherever you wanted to use in your programs. That's why you make it as a, okay, static. That way you don't need to create an instance in your respective programs, rather you directly use it using the method name, static class name dot method. Okay, so sealed class. So sealed class means, okay, it's a class, it doesn't allow the inheritance, it cannot be extended. Okay, it's only applicable. So basically when you try to inherit the sealed class, okay, it will give the error, as again same thing, like, previously you were seeing, right, when you define a private variable and try to use in another class, it was throwing the error, right? So same way, if your class is sealed and if you try to inherit that sealed class, it will not allow you. Okay, so that means you wanted to restrict, okay, you want to restrict the logic only for your class. Nobody should use it or nobody should modify it. Okay, so it's, in the reality, like, string builder is the one which is a sealed class. If you see here, do you remember, guys, what is string and string builder?
Yeah, string builder, it does.
Okay, string builder.
Rather than creating, it reuses the memory.
Right, exactly. Okay, so if you see string builder, okay, I'm trying to access that string builder here. See, it's a sealed one. That means nobody can inherit the properties or methods of the string builder, but you can use it. So basically, they don't want to expand. They don't want someone else to use the methods of this string builder and start modifying it. They don't want them to have that. That's why they make it as seal. See, remember, it's all, depends upon, the programmatical reasons. Okay, if you don't want, your method to be only confined to you and nobody else wants to inherit, right? Normally you keep it secure. That's why you make it as a sealed one only. Okay, you are sealing it only for your needs. You are not allowing to anyone else.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so this one I may not be able to give the example because we need inheritance concepts here. Okay, so I will skip on. And one more is the partial. Okay, so when I say partial class, see, in reality, there are hundreds of people writing the programs, okay, for the same set of application. Suppose if it is it's a new application you are building, obviously one person will not be able to write everything. So you'll have 10 developers working on 10 different requirements, right? So in that scenario, suppose, like, uh, we are like you are supposed to write two methods and I am supposed to write two methods, let's say. Okay, and both should belongs to the same class. Okay, so the class is same, but since due to the time constraints, okay, so they told, like, hey, you write two methods and another person writes two methods. But how? So they use this concept of partial class. So I can define the partial class and you can also define the partial class, and we have to refer the same name. I will say partial class P and you have to say partial class P, and you write the methods A and B and I write the methods C and D. So what happens is, when we combine this, when we combine these two programs, right, what happens? It will treat as one single class, and it say, hey, okay, so I see a partial class here and here, so let's combine. It will club two partial classes into one class, and they will say, okay, it has two A and B and C and D, so it will club into four methods into the same class. Okay, so this also, again, I may not be able to explain in a real time here. Okay, but I will just I written a small code to show you. Okay, partial class, don't save. Okay, so here what I'm trying to say is that, like, no, this is a partial class. Okay, and it's a public modifier, and it has couple of private variables, and you see here, like, no, two different methods. Okay, suppose, like, you are writing the display function, I'm writing geeks function. Okay, so I will have my code which contains only this method, and your code contains only this method. And later, when you compile and when you club these two programs by single DLL, okay, it will combine these two methods and keep it only in one single class. Internally, it will not show you, like, but internally it clubs like that. Okay, and then, you can just simply, run it, since it is a public class. Okay, I should be able to access in another class. Okay, I have created a new object and I'm trying to print the values display and read line. So display, I'm just using the display here. to execute this. Okay, so this is about the partial class. And okay, so this is one point I'm telling you, right? Because if you are trying to use the same partial class, it should be in the same DLL. Okay, my partial class and yours should be combined into same DLL, then only it works, right? That's what is the thumb rule here. Okay, and you always needs to prefix with partial. Okay, and abstract class. So this is also one of the important, guys, like abstract and static is most commonly asked in the interviews. Abstract class means, okay, abstract class is only contains the definitions of the methods or variables. Okay, and there is no way you can create the objects. Okay, so it is similar to static, right? Static class also, can you create the object for static class? No. Same thing for abstract class also, you cannot create the objects. Okay, so then why, if I'm not able to create the object, and I said that you will not define the logic also. It's just a kind of a placeholder. Let me give you one example, that way like you'll be able to easily recall this abstract class. Okay, so here, see, I have one abstract class called animal. Okay, and I have one method, animal sound. Okay, but you see, uh, did I mention any logic in this method? No, right? I did not mention anything here. I don't have, like open brace or some logic and closing, right? There's nothing here. So as I mentioned, it's an abstract method, means it doesn't have a body, no logic defined within the function. But I have one function which contains in a body also. Okay, so basically abstract class means, okay, it is a class which you cannot create the object. Okay, and abstract class may contain only the definitions, it doesn't contains the body. But how to use abstract? If you want to use abstract, you have to inherit that class. Okay, because see, this class is there. If I'm directly creating a object for this animal, and if I invoke this animal sound, will it give any output here? Because I did not say what is the logic inside the animal sound. I did not say anything. It's just only a definition. There is no real body, or there is no real logic inside the function. Okay, so abstract class, you cannot create any object. Okay, and if you wanted to use that abstract class, you have to derive it, you have to inherit that. Okay, so why we have to inherit? Because this animal sound, okay, I'm giving you the real time example, animal sound is different for one animal to another animal. That's why I kept this method as abstract. Okay, and whoever is going to derive this class, it's up to you what logic you wanted to keep in the animal sound. So if you see, I have derived this animal class. Okay, and I mentioned the class name as pig. Okay, so now, because this is how it works, abstract class, if abstract class needs to work, you have to derive it, you have to inherit that. So if you inherit, right, what happens is all these methods whatever available in this class will be appearing for this pig class as well. But what happens is, since in the main class there is no method, there is no body for animal sound, you can write your own logic. Okay, so animal sound I am inheriting from animal class to pig class, but I am writing my own logic here. Okay, and even I can have one more class called dog from the animal, and here again I am trying to write my own logic. So abstract class means it's abstract, it doesn't contains any body. So here, since I am inheriting this two methods, sleep and animal, okay, and since animal sound doesn't have any body, I am writing my own logic. Okay, so if you see, you are overriding the method whatever is defined or declared in the base class, right? That's why you use override. Guys, just take a minute and see, whether it is making sense or you
Yes,
are able
yeah.
to understand,
Yeah, Anna.
right?
One quick question, Anna. So
Mm,
every time we use abstract method or every time we inherit the abstract method in a different class, so do
mm.
you have to always use override to avoid the methods that are in the above class?
Yes, you
Oh,
see, suppose if you are using this sleep, right?
yeah,
If you want to use the same logic whatever is there, you don't need
mm,
to override. But
yeah, okay,
in the animal sound, I don't have any body here, I did not say anything, right? That's why you
yes,
are
yeah,
trying to override here.
yeah,
Okay, but yeah,
okay,
still you can override any method in the abstract class. Okay, you have to say override keyword.
okay, yeah, done, yeah,
Okay, so now here if you see, so basically it's a very realistic example I'm giving, because the sounds of animals is different. That's why I don't want to keep a generic sound in the animal class. That's why I kept it open. Okay, it's up to you guys. Based on your class type, you define what sound it makes. That's why I created a pig class, and pig says VV. Okay, I created dog, I says it is bow bow. So basically this animal sound is different for the each and every animal. So depends upon your needs or your class type or your animal type, you write your own logic, because I cannot make it or more general here, right? Because I don't know what kind of instance you are going to create for this animal class. So if you are unsure, then you make it abstract.
yes, yeah. And also, if you are developing a real-time application,
Mm.
when do we get to use this abstract concept for especially some kind of notification feature or something like that? Or
Okay, I will
when?
give you one. I will give you one more example. Okay, uh, suppose you are trying to calculate the area, the space. Okay, so rectangle formula for calculating space is different, and for square it is different, for triangle it is different, right? So based on, because when you define a method during the definition of the time, you don't know where I have to, what kind of logic I have to put. Okay, so it's up to you. Okay, so what kind of logic you wanted to put? Basically you are leaving that logic to the derived class people. Man, I don't want this headache. You try to do whatever you wanted to do. Okay, so I can give you, okay, I can give you one example. Okay, suppose remember I have taken one example previously, when we are explaining about how this abstraction and encapsulation works, right? So let's say you need to register, you need to do the registration. Okay, let's say registration, and this registration is, it may be a different, okay, for applying electricity connection. Okay, and this may be a different for applying water connection. Okay, or this may be different when you apply for a PAN card or when you apply for a Aadhaar card. So wherever, if you want to avail any service, the basic need is first they will try to register you, right? Okay, and for registration for electricity connection, it may ask some different kind of documents. For water connection, it may ask some other set of documents. For PAN card, it's a different one. Other card is a different one. So I don't know, like, what kind of documents required for electricity connection. I don't know the for water connection. So what I do, I'll just create my registration method and I will leave it to you guys. So whoever is going to work on that particular module for electricity department or water department, okay, so what kind of documents required and what kind of methods you need to process. So while creating the registration class, I don't know. That's why I kept it open. Okay, and I make it abstract. So whoever is going to use this registration class in your modules, okay, you write your own logic. Okay, is that clarifies your question? Hello? I don't know who asked that question. Hello, did I lose you? Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, now we are able to hear you.
Okay, so is that clarifies your question?
Yes, yeah, no, we got it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, if you are unsure, like, about the logic, you just, create abstract and leave it. Don't define any, only define it, but don't write the, the body. Okay, and you see here, right? Since this sleep is already a public, and when you inherit in this class, you can directly use this sleep method. That's why if you see, I'm directly calling the sleep method. Okay, my pig dot sleep, my dog dot sleep, because it's a public, and it's a
Yes, yeah.
public, and it's by default it got inherited in the derived classes.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so I thought of starting constructors today, but, like, due to time limit, I will stop it here, and tomorrow we'll focus on the constructors, and we'll try to complete constructors tomorrow end to end.
Yeah, no. Definitely, yeah, no.
Okay,
All right,
and yeah, any other questions today's class? So just go through the different access modifiers and also the different classes: static, partial, abstract. Okay, so everything you try to read, and okay, if you have any questions, you can ask me tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, and yeah, so I'm stopping my screen sharing, and I don't know who is recording, but Sai, you are recording, you can stop the recording also.
Yeah, and I'll tell him to stop it.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
no.
chalo then.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll meet tomorrow same time. Okay,
Okay,
thanks.
see you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Anand. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, bye.